Welcome to the Estate Expectations Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Pickle. I am so excited about launching this new podcast. And I have to say that I have consulted with clients, with colleagues, with podcast experts here at my fabulous podcast studio, Pod Populi, in Old Town Scottsdale, Arizona. And they all seem to think that it was a good idea for an estate planning and business attorney to start a podcast. Now, I know that legal podcasts can be somewhat dry and boring, but my promise to you, my listeners, is that I will try to make this not only educational and informative, but somewhat entertaining as much as legal issues can be. But we'll talk about a lot of real life scenarios and stories and add a very human element to this podcast. So I, again, appreciate you tuning in and joining me for this new podcast. And you can probably figure out by the name of the podcast, Estate Expectations, that this podcast is going to be about estate planning. And estate planning is such a broad term, and it can mean many different things. And we are going to talk about what is estate planning and, how it impacts us as individuals, how it impacts us as business owners and entrepreneurs. But I first want to point out, why estate planning matters and why it's so important. I felt as an estate planning attorney of 20 plus years that someone has to start a podcast about estate planning. Why not it be me? Why is estate planning essential? So, can you imagine working your entire life to build a life, build a family, support your spouse, support your children, maybe even build a business and a brand? And you've worked so hard. You've put your blood, your sweat, your tears into all of this hard work and these ventures. And then suddenly, life happens. One day you wake up, and just when you think that everything is going according to plan, well, that changes. Because we don't have control over some, really big things that can happen in our lives. And you've built this incredible business and family and empire, if you will, and none of it is protected in a way that it should be had you sat down with intention and mindfulness and created a plan. Why are you building this business? Why are you getting married? Why are you having children if you're not going to protect the things that are the most important things in your entire life? And so, here in Arizona, I will tell you, Arizona has a plan for you. Arizona has an estate plan for everybody, but you probably won't like it very much. And I suspect that's the case in all states. The laws in the particular jurisdiction where you live, the state and where you reside, will take over. If you don't have a thoughtful plan in writing, the laws and the probate courts are going to determine what happens to your estate. And so now let's chat briefly about the common misconceptions about estate planning. And I think that number one is that a common misconception is that it's only for the wealthy. And we can define wealth. What is wealth? What does that mean? Well, if you ask me, I will tell you health is wealth. And we'll probably have an upcoming podcast episode about the importance of taking care of your health and understanding that if you don't have your health, you have no wealth. I digress a bit. But what is wealth? Well, with respect to estate planning, we're talking about your assets, real estate, bank accounts, insurance policies, retirement accounts, stocks, cryptocurrency, even digital assets. And so I don't want you to think that estate planning is only for the wealthy. And I also don't want you to think that it's only about distributing assets after your death. Estate planning also involves planning for you, the individual, or the business while you're still alive. Because if something happens and you're not dead, but you're incapacitated, well, what about you? You should be the priority. You should have someone that you can nominate and you trust who can step up and take care of the day-to-day business and take care of you if you need it. So estate planning is for life. It's for life, okay? And the other misconception is that it has to be very complex and expensive. Now, can it be? Absolutely, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be. You know, an 18-year-old college student, we'll use my college student for an example. He's no longer 18, but when he went off to school in Texas, I sat down and I said to myself, wait a minute, I'm an estate planning attorney. I've been doing this for over 20 years. And it just dawned on me that my child is 18 years old. He's an adult and I have no more control. I mean, I can threaten him to withhold the tuition payments, right? If he doesn't do X, Y, and Z. But seriously, he's an adult at 18 years old. Does he need an estate plan? You bet he does. Does he need a complex estate plan? Of course not. He needs a plan that will allow him to nominate or designate an agent, perhaps his mom or his dad, to have access to his financial records, his medical records, in case he's in a car accident, in case there's any type of an accident on campus. And, it's a tough thing to think about. And even I, again, as a very experienced, seasoned estate attorney, didn't want to think about letting go of control of my child. But the truth is, it's something every parent needs to consider. So everyone should have an estate plan if you are at least age 18. And I will say that I probably should have had this statistic ready to go for this podcast, but the majority of people in this country do not have an estate plan. And so the problem then becomes very costly because now we don't have a plan. We're looking to the courts to create the plan. And that's where it becomes very expensive. And it could have been easily avoided. And so if I could, I want to talk a minute about the human element of estate planning. And I'd like to share my own personal story. And I'm gonna tell you the short version because I usually tell this story when I present webinars and seminars. And so we don't have a lot of time here. I like to keep these podcast episodes to about 20 minutes because I want you all to stay awake and pay attention and really get some value from these podcasts. But when I was a fresh green attorney, just graduated from law school, I thought I was going to go into medical malpractice litigation. I had intended on representing plaintiffs in medical malpractice. And, that was kind of sexy, sounded exciting, lots of money to be made. And so I never in a million years thought I would become a transactional attorney and get into the whole death and dying law. That didn't sound like a lot of fun. But nonetheless, my grandfather approached me, as I said, when I graduated from law school. And he said, Elizabeth, now you are a big, fancy schmancy attorney from Boston. I went to Boston. I went to New England law. And he said, I want you to do something for me. And I said, okay, sure, Grandpa. What would you like me to do? He said, I want you to draft me a will. You know that your brother was the son I never had. And I want to leave the family farm to him. I've already talked to the family. Everyone's on board. Everybody agrees that he should be the beneficiary of the farm. And I thought, well, sure, Grandpa, I can do that. And I did my due diligence. I did have a family meeting. Everybody was in agreement. We knew that there wasn't going to be any dispute later on with respect to disinheritance issues. And we did have a small farm growing up as kids. My brother, he helped my grandfather quite a bit with, feeding the animals and just taking care of the property. And it made a lot of sense. And so I'd never drafted a will. And I did my due diligence once again, drafted the will accordingly under my grandfather's scrutiny. And that was great. And that was fine. And eventually my grandfather passed away. God rest his soul. And my brother took possession of the farm. We did have to open a probate because when you create a will, the will automatically toss your estate right into probate court. And, again, that can be fine for some people in some situations. So we probated the will and conveyed the property to my brother. And over the years, he lived on the farm and he continued to work the farm, enjoyed life, and he was appreciative and grateful to have the property. And he ended up getting married, like so many of us do, and having kids. And his wife moved onto the property, and they had a family. And she worked hard as well, and she contributed to the family farm. And everything was just peachy keen until it wasn't. And unfortunately, so many of us have experienced difficulty in our marriages. And ultimately, my brother and his wife became divorced. And what had happened to the family farm over the years is that although it was an inherited property, it kind of morphed into this marital asset. When two people are contributing finances, income, again, working on the land, blood, sweat, and tears, they both are contributing now to this family farm and this home together, and they're growing a family together. So during the divorce, neither one of them could buy the other out. And so the court ordered that the farm be put up for sale as it was now a marital asset, and the proceeds are to be split 50-50. So we no longer have a family farm. And this is back in Maine, where I'm from originally. And my parents' home is still there in Maine. And, just 500 yards across the field is our family farm that is owned now by complete strangers. Now, did I have a lot of therapy when that happened? I sure did. But what I came to the conclusion that I really didn't do anything wrong. I drafted a will. I didn't know what I didn't know. But had I considered other planning tools, such as a family trust, well, it's very likely that my family would still own the property today. But as a fresh new attorney out of law school, I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. And so I tell you this story so that you understand what my purpose is, because I found my life's purpose real quick when that happened. And I promised my grandfather that I would never let that happen again on my watch. And so when I meet with clients, we talk about these issues. We talk about the client's intentions. What are their goals? What are their hopes and dreams for the future and for their children? And what kind of planning makes sense? Because estate planning is not about creating documents. It's not about walking into an attorney's office and asking for a will or a piece of paper for them to sign. That's not estate planning. Estate planning is a carefully curated and customized plan that is as unique as you are. It's as unique as your DNA, as your thumbprint, and it's different. It looks different for everybody. So, I just want to share that with you. And I get a little choked up about it to this day. But I hope my grandfather is looking down upon me and saying, you really mucked that one up, but you're making up for it. Yeah. So, what to expect from this podcast. In future episodes, we are definitely going to talk more about wills and trusts and, let's see, what else? Estate taxes. Everybody's favorite. Digital assets. Designating an agent for a power of attorney, healthcare. We're also going to talk about building a business, building a brand, which would include your intellectual property, trademarks, patents, copyrights. And so while I want to spend probably the first 3 episodes talking to you, just me and you and me, and getting to know each other, we will absolutely be bringing on some incredible guests. I have been blessed over the years in meeting so many incredible attorneys, colleagues, financial advisors, other specialists in the field that I will be bringing onto the podcast because I have a certain skill set and I have a certain knowledge base. And so I always say that I am smart enough to know not to be the smartest person in the room. And I try to surround myself with the greatest minds in wealth building and estate planning. So we will definitely be talking to some fabulous people and experts in future episodes. And so, of course, I encourage you to subscribe and engage with this podcast. We'll have the podcast available on all of the preferred podcast platforms. And it would mean so much to me if you could leave a review and follow us on social media. Thank you so much for joining me on this inaugural, I guess we could say, podcast episode. And we are estate planning for the modern world. Thank you.